Hi, my name is Michael Chikeen. The smartest people I've met have one common belief, that us silly humans really don't know much. For example, we still don't know why planes stay in the air, or how Tylenol or even gravity works. Yeah, gravity. Look it up. In today's distracted, clickbait, misinformation age, I wish we could all be less certain, more humble, and a lot more curious. Admittedly, I've been known to struggle with all three. So no more, no less, this show is my attempt to be that change. Thanks for joining me, and here we go. Hey everybody, welcome back to No More, No Less. I'm Michael Chikeen, and today in the virtual studio, I have with me Dr. Sapna Shah-Haque. Sapna is a board-certified internal medicine physician. She was born and raised in Kansas and completed her internal medicine residency at KU Wichita. After experiencing burnout herself and watching other physicians and colleagues burn out, it became a passion of hers to look into different aspects of the condition. Her book, Thriving After Burnout, is available on Amazon.com, and so let's dive in and cover everything burnout related. Dr. Shah-Haque, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I think we should start just at the beginning and how burnout became such an important part of your life that you wanted to start giving back to people that perhaps experienced it as well.
Sure. So in 2019, my best friend from medical school and residency unfortunately died from suicide. And she took her own life in her office. And the biggest question was why? You know, why would a physician, it's such a beautiful profession, why would a physician want to take her own life? And, you know, the truth is, there's no financial status that protects against that. And she was afraid to seek help because of professional repercussion. In the medical world, physicians and other practitioners, every year we go to renew our license. And one of the several questions, there used to be, I believe, 3 questions on the licensing questionnaire here in Kansas. Do you suffer from anxiety or depression? Do you have substance abuse issues? Does it impact your ability to practice medicine? And, you know, physicians are advised to not be truthful because it's the question of, if I check this box and I say yes, what's going to happen? Am I going to lose my license? Now, having said that, we know that anxiety, depression, PTSD, these are medical issues. These are medical issues that, as a primary care physician, I treat day in and day out. They're no different than hypertension, diabetes, which are accepted. Those are accepted diagnoses, but there's still a stigma around mental health. But mental health is health. Having said that, because of the unknown, because of this Wizard of Oz, and yeah, I'm from Kansas, but that's not the reason for the reference. But, you know, if you pull back the curtain, you know, what's going to happen? What are you going to see? And so many healthcare professionals do not seek help that they truly need because of possible professional repercussions, whatever that might be. So when Dr. Bicker took her own life, my question was why? And I started reading, and I found that female physicians are 2.5 times more likely than their male counterparts to die from suicide. And in the general population, it's usually men that are more successful to die from suicide than women, mostly because of the methods that they choose.
Right. The numbers, I believe, are 4 to 1, men to women suicide. And before we go on, I want to say I'm really so sorry to hear about your friend, Dr. Bicker.
Dr. Bicker, yeah.
Dr. Bicker. That's so tragic, and it sounds like you really are trying to, you know, carry on her legacy of your friendship, even to make sure that, you know, no one else has to wake up one day and find out that their friend's taken their own life. And considering that you guys are in the same profession, I was wondering, do you now look for like these different signals from colleagues that may be going through burnout? Because I know even here in Spain, some most doctors are forced to do 24-hour shifts, and I have a cousin who's a nurse, and he's constantly doing 12 or more hour shifts, and if you want to change with someone to get more time off, you end up working all these night shifts and 12-hour shifts in a row, and it becomes so much part of the culture that I hear from on the outside. And so I'm wondering what you're seeing now on the inside, now that you're maybe more even hyper aware that someone might be going through something like this.
Well, that's the thing. It's hard to pick up. Because it was only through my reading and learning that the statistics of suicide in the physician population is the highest among any profession. We do lose 400 physicians a year here in the United States, and this is pre-pandemic. These are pre-pandemic
Wow.
statistics, and that's probably underreported. Having said that, I started reading about burnout, and I realized I've been burnt out twice, but I didn't have the verbiage to really describe it. And so, on my podcast, when I talk to other physicians about their story through burnout or overwhelm, it takes many of these individuals years to really come up with what I'm feeling as burnout or moral injury. And so it's difficult to pinpoint. But one thing is, if there's a personality change, and it can be subtle, but you start noticing it. For example, maybe a clinician is not as engaged with conversation, or somebody that's a pretty, naturally happy-go-lucky person, or a pretty positive person, starts to have this, I don't want to say doom and gloom, but more irritability, more fatigue that is not remedied by rest or a couple days off. Yeah, it's just this. It's a spiral that is very slippery. I mean, it's a slope. It's subtle. And it's compounding behaviors and changes that a lot of times are hard to see.
Right. Yeah, I think sometimes we can maybe underestimate what someone is going through and just kind of brush it aside, as in like, oh, this person's become so negative now, or this person's become this and that, and maybe there's an element of that. Like maybe that is true. Maybe they're just changing their overall demeanor. But as you alluded to, maybe sometimes there's something a lot deeper where everything is looking like it's closing in, and so everything, they can't see hope, they can't see maybe ways out or just the brighter side of their existence. Is there any commonalities you've seen with people that you've either worked with now, or because how are you going about to try to combat this? I notice you have a podcast as well. Are you take on clients, or like what is the world of burnout look for your interaction with it?
Sure. So for your listeners, I'm just gonna go ahead and define burnout syndrome as defined by the World Health Organization, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
So it's feelings of energy or emotional exhaustion, not remedied by rest. So it's not like, okay, I was up working late last night, I'm tired, I'm going to go take a nap, and now I feel better. It's just complete exhaustion and not really able to catch up on or recapture that energy. Depersonalization or feeling of cynicism related to one's job. So again, this is going back to job related, not a personality issue. This is not a personality issue or a lack of resilience on the individual. And then reduced professional efficacy or reduced feeling of accomplishment with what you're doing.
Right.
So I'm not a coach, but with my podcast, what I've done is I've talked to several physicians, And some of the common things are, I thought that, by switching jobs, this would be better. But the same symptoms still keep coming up. And, these can also manifest as physical things, such as teeth grinding, muscle tension, insomnia, hypersomnia, irritability, or even the other way of maybe crying for no reason, and you're like, that's not me. And a lot of times it's just attributed to, oh, it's stress, but that's just the way the work environment is, and everybody goes through this, and so why am I feeling like this? And if I talk about it, I'm gonna be seen as weak.
Right.
Like that. That's
If I may interject for a minute,
sure.
I definitely have experienced burnout. I had, several years ago, when I was running 2 or 3 concurrent companies at the same time, and I was moving countries, etc. And I had like you said, teeth grinding, sleep irritability. I was more irritable. I was more reactive. And even when I came out of those, and I sold those companies, and the weight of them, of the responsibility of everything was no longer there, I still had an element of that I realized I had to rectify, and that was like therapy. There was psychedelics involved at one point with a therapist, and like it took me a long road to get to where I am now, where like starting new projects does not feel like a mountain I can't climb. If I have interpersonal relationships that are more difficult, I have more resiliency to be able to deal with them honestly and directly, and there's not any sort of like as much trepidation as I would have. There's not as much catastrophic thinking, and I really see it in the like this cult of entrepreneurship and productivity, that like one or both is the salvation for people looking for answers. And I find normally they end up providing sometimes more problems in the long run, because the idea that I used to see, like productivity, you need to be productive all the time, you need to be doing this, you've got to be doing more, find this software to improve this, but it becomes this really gross treadmill that the more things you can fit into your life to be quote unquote more productive, all you're doing is just giving yourself more and more to do. And like it never gets better. You just feel more and more trapped, because if one of those little hacks or whatever you want to call them fall apart, all of a sudden you're doing that thing all over again, and it's really gross. It's gross, and it's so damaging to so many people. Like I'm sure I can't even imagine what it's like in the healthcare space, where people are depending on you, and you also have like the fulfillment of being a doctor and helping people save lives. But then I'm sure there's also when you might cause someone's death by accident, or let a patient down, or all of the there's just so much pressure squeezed in to the healthcare space. Like I'm sure I can't even imagine the vice grip that a lot of physicians must feel.
I think there's a lot of truth to everything you just said, right? There's this concept of productivity. And one of those, I think with entrepreneurship, and even with physicians and healthcare, we also have to know when to say no. Like, I can't do that.
Right.
And by saying no, you say yes to something else, which might be better sleep quality, which might be, yeah, exactly. That's not selfish. That's not selfish. It's not about putting me first all the time. It's about saying me too. Because, I mean,
Right.
do you really want a sleep-deprived doctor? When we know that sleep deprivation is equivocal, if not worse than being intoxicated, because we don't have the restoration that the body needs.
Right. And I'm going to extrapolate that to
Sure.
like aside from physicians as well, because as you're going to speak, I'm probably always going to see it through just the population at large. So would you say, like, does anyone want a sleep-deprived doctor? Obviously, the answer is no. But I think we can also say, does anyone want a sleep-deprived parent, spouse, bus driver? There are just so many things that all these people, all of us, should be taking care of our basic needs, and that's like food, sustenance, love, like all of these things that is so easy to analogize from physicians, which obviously with the life and death sort of scenario, it puts it even more in the spotlight, I think, which I think is helpful for this conversation.
But at the same time, I love what you said. Like, we don't want a sleep-deprived bus driver, because that bus driver is not only responsible for the passengers, but also has to be responsible when on the road with looking out for pedestrians, other drivers, making sure that they stay on the road and in the correct lane. We don't want a sleep-deprived parent because that increases the risk of snapping. That increases the risk of putting a child in harm, and not necessarily with the intent. So sleep is incredibly important for everyone. That is self-care. That's not selfish, it is self-care.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's such an important point too, that I can't believe you mentioned. So there's 400 physicians that take their life every year.
Here in the United States, yes.
Wow. That seems like a very big number, and I've never heard anything like that. You know what I mean? Like no one's ever reported on that, because I think we think, oh, doctors they feel fulfilled, they're doing this wonderful job, especially in the States. They are highly compensated, which I'd be curious what the numbers are in other countries for this, for that. But the pressures also, and the systems in which they work in, seems to put them under immense pressure. Is that what you would kind of give some of the responsibility in the system, is the pressure that they're put under?
The system, yes, because physicians were some of the. Think about the training, right? Let's think about the training. Not only do we go through college here in the States. That's about 4 years, on average, maybe 5. There might be a gap year. There might be a year of research, and then we go into 4 years of medical school, and then at least 3 to 7 years of residency, and that's not including if you do further specialization. So to go through that grueling process, you have to be pretty darn resilient, because it's incredibly competitive. Having said that, it is absolutely the system in which we work. And why would I say that? Yes, though physicians are highly compensated, on average, you're getting out with $300,000 of debt. I came out with $500,000 of debt for medical school alone.
Oh my God. What?
Yeah, that's one thing that they don't tell you about, is the amount of debt that you incur. The amount of debt that a physician incurs to go through all that training, to take on that responsibility to take care of patients, is hundreds of thousands of dollars. And again, we start about 10 years behind the 8 ball of those of our counterparts that maybe did not go through that much schooling, and over compound interest over time, that adds up toward retirement. So we start late as far as actual earning. We're having to pay back these massive amount of loans. The way we think that medicine is going to be practiced and the way it is practiced are completely two different things. Because we think that we're going to go out and we're going to make this big impact, and while we do, there are so many invisible powers within the exam room that are telling us how to practice medicine. Yeah, if you ever wonder here in the States why your physician runs out of the office, it's because we have X amount of patients to see in an hour. And unless you're in a private practice, a lot of these things are dictated by the administration. So I'm sorry, yes, this is a 20-minute visit. We can't cover everything. And that's not the reason why we went into medicine. It's not the money. It's because we actually truly want to help people, because there are easier ways to make money without the liability, without the debt.
Right.
So we have the insurance companies telling us what they will pay for, what they won't pay for, what they won't authorize, what they will authorize. There are so many medications, such as even a generic medication, let's say for high blood pressure or diabetes. They deny it or they need a prior authorization, and this is considered first-line treatment, and you're telling me that we need a prior authorization for a first-line medication that is generic? That's bullocks. That's absolutely nonsense. And then we have the insurance companies telling what they will pay for, what they won't pay for as far as like a hospital stay. So that might play into what insurances are accepted or not. That does put a barrier to access to care. The need for prior authorization or peer-to-peer references to say, hey, look, I'm the one that examined this patient. They need the MRI of X, Y, and Z, and you're telling me no. Can you tell me why? And you might not even be talking to a physician. If you are talking to a physician, they might not be of the same specialty. They might be of a specialty that hasn't touched a patient in several years. But they're going by...
People are turning down MRIs, like if a physician would recommend them.
Yes.
Why? For like insurance reasons?
Insurance reasons.
What the hell is wrong with the states? Like, these are things that I don't even understand. Like growing up in Canada, I spent most of my time, spent a lot of time in the last 10, 15 years in Europe. That is something that, like, the idea that a financially incentivized company can tell you no when a physician is granting you an MRI or recommends you get an MRI is absolutely fucking bonkers.
Yeah,
to me.
yeah, it is.
Like the fact that that's happening and people aren't riding for that as well in the U.S. is also a mystery, because it's one thing that, like, there are other places that have two-tier healthcare, which I actually think Canada would benefit from, and there are even Spain, which has one of the top 10 healthcare systems in the world, have private insurance. People pay 100 or 200 euros a month, and you can get access to either a better dentist or faster wait times, like little things like that. I'm not even sure, because I have my own private insurance, so I haven't experienced being in the public. But everyone I've spoken to said the public system is great. But in the U.S., the amount I've heard for a good private healthcare insurance, the amounts are really indefensible.
I would have to agree. I mean, medical debt is still one of the leading causes for bankruptcy. How is that ethical? It's not. But if we, if someone comes to me as a physician and they're going to ask, hey, can we work this up? I will give them options. Like, in the sense of, this is step 1, step 2, step 3. If financials are concerned, that obviously has to be taken into it. I don't think it should be, because, unfortunately there's this thing called a copay, which until you reach a certain amount, depending on the insurance that you have to pay maybe 20% out of pocket, then everything else is covered, X amount, maybe like 100%, as long as it's within network. And that's just, it's sick that we put people's health before, or we put money before people's health.
Right, like even the things you said is too complicated. Like, I think I understand most of how it works, but just the idea that people have to think about these things that are more complicated than they need to be to access proper medical care it just leaves such a cognitive load of this like piece of friction in your mind to think, oh, maybe I don't need to go, or maybe I don't want to deal with it, or if they do deal with it and then they have all of these bills, well then it adds more pressure onto their life and less likely for them to want medical or unable to get medical help in the future. And like speaking of bringing it back to burnout, like physician aside, if you're putting the pressure of all these medical bills on top of someone just because they needed medical attention, like it's more likely that that person will experience burnout in their regular lives as well, because it's just the pressure of everything mounting at once. And the one thing most people don't need in this life is, a heaping of debt or the inability to go and get medical assistance. And it's so frustrating for me to even hear and talk to. I can't imagine what it feels like to be inside the system that you can have positive effect and change into just through your patients, but the whole thing is a bit of a monster to try to affect real long-standing systemic change.
That's correct. I mean, it's a lot of this is government, like CMS, or government, like Medicare. They set what we can and can't do. Reimbursement goes down for a population that needs a lot of service because of the age group.
Right.
Makes no sense, and that really adds to the ability to access, because there are physicians that won't take that. I work for a nonprofit and a rural health clinic because I love the mix. I love the mix of patients, and I don't want to say no, we won't take this insurance, or yes. I leave that up to the administration. I see patients. I'm in an area where it's still physician friendly, but we still have to go through these things about, prior authorizations or what the insurance company will or won't do. The medication prices are astronomical.
Right. Yeah, I think there's people finally, unfortunately, in the States, it seems that the only solution to capitalism is capitalism, which is honestly it's a bit of a joke to begin with. But it seems at least there are people like Mark Cuban that started like that cost plus drugs to start selling generics a lot cheaper, and hopefully there'll be some sort of legislation soon. But are you seeing any prices coming down anywhere else in the system, or is it just something that you have to deal with to try to find a way to give the best care that is possible?
A lot of times we don't know what the cost is going to be to the patient until we send the script, and that's unfortunate. It really depends on the type of insurance that they have. Don't even get me started on that. It's not ethical. It's not ethical because, again, this is a decision that the physician and the patient are making together, right? This is something that I like to try to approach it as they're the experts in their body. I'm the expert in medicine. We try to have this be a team approach. So it's a shared decision making as to what the next best step would be. Instead of me saying you're going to go do this, that's paternalistic. That's not really the way I think medicine is nowadays. Maybe 40, 50 years ago, but now it's just shared decision making. And we've made this decision. We've come up with this plan in the office, and now it's cost prohibitive. And it's first line or it's second line medication, but it's cost prohibitive. That makes no sense. Especially when a lot of the newer medications that are coming out for, like example, high blood pressure and diabetes, it decreases the risk of heart attack. It increases longevity, and it's having a lot of good positive effects. But it's cost prohibitive, and this patient needs it. That pisses me off every time. I mean, I get mad. I get mad in the office,
Right.
in my office.
Like that seems just like a normal human response, to be angry to these such basic things. And not to belabor this point too much, but even in Canada, I'm experiencing it a little bit where a relative is on a certain kind of expensive medication for the ailment that they have that's quite serious, and they've had great results with it for the past 5 or 6 years now. And now I've heard that now they need to go on the generic, and the Canadian government will not even allow, like there's no option to even appeal to get the brand name, even if someone wants to pay for it. They've just decided it's going to be cheaper for them to get the generic, and the studies are showing, like at least it's evidence-based to a certain degree, that the generic is showing similar to exact results from the brand name. But we all know that it's to switch to a generic. Sometimes the brand name just has something that has better results, and so it's frustrating even to see, a relative that is getting good results for a serious ailment on a brand name medication having to be forced to go on to the generic. And this is, everything is about cost savings these days, and none of it is for the benefit of the patient. And so I understand how people can be so angry over pharma companies and hate pharma companies so much. But part of it is also the government, the society that we've built. Like, listen, I'm happy to hate on a pharma company as much as the next guy, but like there is needs for research and for new medications to come to market. Like there is a need in that, but we've just set up the incentive system so screwy that we've put like shareholders beyond patients. And it's like, that's why when you say you get angry in your office, like that seems like the reaction everybody should have. And so what do you hear from your colleagues that have to deal with similar scenarios?
The exact same. I mean, it's a shared commonality of being disgruntled and not liking it, right?
Right.
Well, I agree that, I'm all for innovation. I'm all for R&D. I'm all for entrepreneurship. I'm all for that. But circling back to, burnout, it's what happens is that what we sign up for one thing. I think you'd find it very similar in entrepreneurship and in any profession. Mm-hmm. You sign up for one thing. Reality's another. But there are so many invisible forces that drive what is. And when you pull back that curtain, again, going back to that Wizard of Oz reference, you don't like what you see because the drivers of, again, productivity, it's about putting the dollar before people and really trying to squeeze everything out of a human being that you possibly can. It is leadership not caring about the human element of their workers. And that's anywhere.
So when you're, and I'm sure even a lot of these feelings of helplessness in your role, in which traditionally doctors have had a lot of, I think, autonomy and praise, and like almost a pedestal in society, which sure I'm sure helped to alleviate some of the frustrations that come with any job. But it seems now, if there is more helplessness on the physician's part baked into the system because of how broken, at least in the U.S.
It's very broken.
How broken
Yeah.
the system is. When you see someone going through burnout, or let's say you have, I'm sure your colleagues know that you're doing this podcast, and maybe they share with another colleague that they see might be suffering. What sort of, for lack of a better term, what sort of prescription would you give to that physician or that person that is in the throes of burnout?
Yeah. First thing is to seek help. Seek help. We can be replaced at work, but we can't be replaced at home. And we have to remember that we're more than just our job. We're more than just a title. We're more than just a degree. We're human beings. That is for anyone. You're a human being. I'm a human being. You require sleep. I require sleep. Get help, whether that be a therapist, a psychiatrist, a life coach, And it might be a combination of all three, or maybe two of them. But the biggest thing is to get professional help.
The Yeah, because I'm glad you mentioned that it's not just about work, and we're not just the work that we do, that we're also fathers, sons, friends, all of these things. You might be a coach or whatever, and I think if there's different levers that are falling on top of you, like the another analogy I like to use is that sometimes there's just so much steam in the pot that we just need to find ways to let out some of that steam. And so if we can take out some of that pressure, being like maybe solving some of the issues at home, maybe there's a couples counselor someone needs to get, or maybe you realize you need to change jobs, or if you can afford to take a bit of a sabbatical, or like any sort of parts of your life that's adding steam to that pot. If you're not solving one of them or taking some steam out, eventually there's going to be like the machinery that is your life is going to explode. Something is going to burst somewhere, and that becomes, as you said, a physical ailment, a mental ailment. It's going to start interrupting and messing with relationships in your life, because you just can't take even the stress of perhaps being in an interpersonal interaction. So is there, like, if someone goes and gets help, like, do you have any other advice that you give them that they can take on their own? Like, is there a multi-pronged approach to this, or like how would you have you been advising people?
My own personal journey, I sought counseling. And what I learned from that was, what our conversation has been about, identifying the fact that you're more than just your job. You're more than just this degree, right? You have to look at drawing boundaries. You have to look at what you're willing to do and why, and what you're not willing to do and why, and really stick to that. And that's going to change over time. Like, nothing's set in stone here. But as you transform as a person, your boundaries are going to change, your needs are going to change, and you really have to look at that. And it pushes you to an uncomfortable level, because you have to acknowledge some things about yourself that maybe you don't want to acknowledge. That, yeah, maybe I should not be doing X, Y, and Z, or maybe I work part-time, because that allows me to balance my life. That's what I need. That's what I need to keep doing this for the next 20, 30 years. I'm upfront about that.
Right. Yeah.
So
being honest, I think, with ourselves is probably some of the hardest work in those scenarios, especially if you've, let's say, taken on $500,000 in debt, and you're 5 years into your work, and you're just thinking, I can't take this anymore. But there's unfortunately that financial pressure that says you have to. And so if we can I think people are scared to be honest with themselves, maybe, for how miserable they might be in any aspect of their lives. Like, the idea that there's this cult of happiness as well, that, like, if you feel any emotion that isn't happiness, well, you must be broken or a failure or majorly depressed, and all those things just aren't true. Like, sadness is a bit of I think, an alarm system in our lives. And so we can start to think, like, okay, well, if I accept that I'm sad, then what am I sad about? What needs to change? And like you seem to have adapted with, as accepting the reality that you were burning out, you said, okay, well, I still have some debts or whatever, but I can work, part-time. I can pay my bills and get everything done that I need to in my life, but that's the way that I need to manage this. Otherwise, the machinery of my life is going to break. And who knows, like, maybe in a couple years, you feel like you're on more stable ground, and maybe you pick up a few hours, or you start maybe running for office in Kansas to see if you can if you can change something that way. But like, have you felt like like accepting kind of what you're able to manage has helped the rest of your life as well?
Absolutely. And I think it's also acknowledging the fact that, okay, I'm not superhuman, right? I mean, I know that, but with my training that I've been through, like, we have to go through everything without complaining. And you should be thankful to be here. And while I am, I'm thankful for everything that I do. Like, I love what I do. But it's also about sustainability. And so, yeah, I'm not going to be Superwoman and say I work 6 days a week and I do everything like a perfect parent should do. No, I mess up. I forgot that my kid got out at 11:30 and picked her up at 11:45. School had to call me. Yeah, I messed up. I took my other kid to school today a day early, and he was mad at me the rest of the day because I made his first day of school a day earlier than what it was. And so yes, that really happens.
Right. In your defense, 15 minutes late for a pickup, like that should not be a non-offense. Like,
Oh,
like
no, but I mean the whole point is, yeah, I was it was on my day off. Well, wasn't it? I was off that day for other reasons, but my mind was elsewhere. My mind was elsewhere, occupied with something else, and I messed up the schedule. So I'm not perfect. I totally forget that they need X, Y, and Z, or that we have a meeting the next day, and I forget these things. Even though I have a calendar, even though I have a calendar on the wall, I have a planner, and I have my cell phone, right, with the Google Calendar. But life is messy. Life is difficult. Adulting is hard. We are now in a society where we're expected to be a one-person show. And we have to remember, like, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, we were still living in joint families or a village, and a lot of these things were divided up. Childcare was literally, it takes a village to raise a child. And there's a truth to that saying because, when we were still hunters and gatherers, all the women took care of the children while the mother of the newborn slept. And they would take turns. And so it's amazing that we expect human beings that need rest, that need time to chill out and de-stress, that we expect to do all these roles perfectly of adulting and then working and then taking care of a family and being perfect all the time, being able to give our 100% no matter how emotionally, physically, psychologically, spiritually exhausted we are.
I think that's a really important point to dive deeper on. Sometimes it's not just the profession, it really is the society itself that's kind of made burnout the definition of success. And I don't think anyone would ever think of it like that. But if everyone has to be everything all the time, perfect parents, perfect spouses, earn X amount, be doing everything all the time, as you're driving, be in a yoga pose, and then get out of your car and dive into a cold plunge or whatever the
Exactly.
going on these days. Like,
Right.
I think it's by definition impossible to be everything all at once. And I hope that we're going to, kind of correct course in a healthy way, that we realize that, like, this isn't the goal of life to beat ourselves to death with work and expectations. That, like, yeah, we can strive for better things and for fulfillment, but doing everything all the time is going to lead to everyone hating everything, including themselves, which I think is what is kind of part and parcel with burnout. I think you kind of turn that in on yourself. Have you seen that at all?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think, again, going back to the culture and being everything to everyone and being perfect all the time, In medicine, we're taught to be perfect as far as decision making in the clinic, in the clinical scenario, right? We want that.
Right.
As physicians and as patients, we want that. But then I think that this mentality, we turn it in on ourselves. And I just had this discussion last week with Dr. Gail Gazelle from Harvard Medical School on my podcast. We start to turn that in on ourselves, and oh gosh, I'm not perfect at this, and I'm not perfect at that. And that's where it gets dangerous, right? That's where it gets dangerous, because we have to remember that we're human beings. We're not perfect beings. We're human beings.
Right.
So it's one thing to want to be perfect at, clinical skills. That's the striving for. There's also the art of medicine. There's the art of communication. There's the art of the physical exam and interpreting, medical data that we have with testing. What it is not is we have to remember to give ourselves grace to be able to show emotion. Be able to say, I have to go home. This is going to have to wait till tomorrow. I'm tired. Or this has been a really hard day. I've had to deliver bad news. That's really taking a toll on me as an empath, as a healer. I need to go home to my family. I need to go home and just hug my dog, or go for a run, go for a swim, go for a cold plunge, like what you were talking about. But I think it's okay to lean into those emotions. I think it's okay to lean into the messiness of life.
Right. Sorry. Something else?
No,
Okay.
that was it.
Because what I was going to say is that it's really interesting, because I think it backs into a bigger conversation in society we're having right now about feelings and how important they are and are not, right? Like, I think hopefully we can agree that they don't mean everything, and they definitely don't mean nothing.
Mm-hmm.
and so I tend to think that life itself will cauterize some of your emotions depending how, like, if we enter food famines tomorrow, or a world war, or things like that, like, we're going to have to deal with that. And I don't tend to think that making us emotional robots before we get to that is going to make us deal with that better or be better humans. I think, like, we'll deal with that as well as we can when we get there. And so your concept of, or your example you just used of how you might want to tell someone, like, listen, I just had to give some terrible news to someone or a series of people, and I'm emotionally drained right now. I need some time to just recover before I come back tomorrow. I can already hear people on that, like, on a certain part of this conversation that would be like, well, it's just bad news. That's your job. You can do it again. You should do, like, and I think it speaks to this idea that, we should have to do all these difficult things and just be harder and not give in to our emotions. But I tend to think, like, the emotions are always going to be there. We're not switching them off. I think it just makes us a little bit more traumatized if we ignore them, because eventually, if you've given 10 days of these worst, terrible news, it's just going to take you that much time to get back to baseline to recover your humanity. And that's kind of the way that I look at it, that, like, everything in life has an equal and opposite reaction that I think we need to get us back to baseline. Have you seen anything that might make sense of what I just tried to convey?
Yeah, because when I tried to do it all day in, day out, I burned out. I would come home and I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to even, this was way, 2013, 2014, 2015. I write about it in my part of Thriving After Burnout. I didn't want to talk to anybody, including my beloved greyhounds. Like, This was before kids, and I didn't even want to talk to my greyhounds, and they were my cherished dogs. And yeah, I know it might be silly to say I didn't want to come home and talk to my dogs, but we rescued them. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to talk to my family. I didn't want to talk to friends. You know, as part of that isolation that can be seen with burnout. And a lot of it was because while I understand it was my job and I signed up for this, I didn't know the depth, right? Because even on my days off, on my weekends off when I was out of town, I was still getting called.
Right. Well,
And
I would say, yeah, it's a little funny and silly to think of the idea of not wanting to talk to the greyhounds, but I think if you think about it for a second, like, I think it speaks to how much must have been suffering and burnt out that you didn't want to interact with a dog. Like who doesn't want to interact with a dog?
I know.
That's
I
the first
know.
thing I thought of. I'm
Exactly.
like, yes, if I'm in a bad mood, like, just cover me in puppies.
Exactly.
I'd be super happy with that. But like the idea that you've got home and you wanted to disconnect so completely, even from these things that are just like one-way love, really
Yeah.
goes to speak to your mental health. And I would, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume that is not good. That disposition is not going to make you a better physician.
Oh, it's definitely not. It's definitely not.
And
If I-
I was gonna say, I think we look at that like, I think we want physicians that are in our corner, that are listening to us, that are able to empathize with us. But if they
Right.
don't empathize with themselves, I think it's impossible to do it with patients.
You got it. You got it. And yeah, well, it might be my job to deliver bad news. The thing is that the key word that I used was the two of them, an empath and a healer, right? That's the reason why I went into medicine, because there's nothing better than the human body, the physiology. Like, that's the ultimate machine right there. That's a crux of science and art. And then to be able to serve humanity as a physician, I originally wanted to do Doctors Without Borders. So, yeah, that was the intent. Life has me here where I'm at, and I love it here, because I have the ability to have a positive impact on on the community and friends and family. But yes, if you look at, I also have to replenish my cup in order to go do it day after day after day, because I will put in 100% of what I can. And when I don't know the answer, I'm going to be honest that I don't know the answer. And I don't think that that's wrong. I think that's truthful. And, so showing up as your authentic self, being able to say I don't know, being able to say I can't do that, being able to say I need this time, I need this space, I think that's very healthy. But you have to do that inner work a lot of times to be able to feel comfortable doing that, because those are things that we're not taught.
Yeah, and I'm sure we can easily extrapolate that to, parents or, people, our spouses, people are in any position in which they need to take time for themselves, because there's obviously things that we all have responsibilities, and I think we will prioritize what actually has to get done. Like, I don't think you're gonna, you know what I mean, leave your kid at a friend's house for 5 days. Visiting. Like, there are things that, but sometimes it's like, well, maybe I don't take them to this because I need a day off as well, or just something along these lines, that if we prioritize ourselves a little bit, then maybe the rest of the time we can show up as our better selves. And I think that's the best we can try to do. Like, I know even recently I reacted to a text worse than I wanted to, and I realized that, like, well, I was having a really stressful day, and a message came in that also wasn't very nice. And I normally, if I didn't have these stressors, then perhaps I could have arrived to that conversation as my better self, and I didn't. And so now I realize I'm going to have to go back and have a more difficult conversation to make up for a reaction that I shouldn't have had, to bring that relationship back to baseline, which I know it will go. But I think these are the things that, like, if we accept that, like, okay, I'm having a very stressful day, I'm seeing this come in, and I can't react generously, empathetically. I'm going to react how I'm going to react. Well, then we have to deal with these consequences. And so that's why I really want to thank you for writing your book and speaking to your colleagues and having your podcast. And I was hoping if there's any message you could leave with someone listening that maybe is heading towards burnout or currently experiencing burnout, like what would you have to say to them?
Remember that you matter. You can be replaced at work, but you cannot be replaced at home. You're worth getting help. Please invest in yourself because you matter. It doesn't matter your profession, it doesn't matter what walk of life or what you believe as far as spirituality or whatever. Just, you're a human being. You're on this earth. You're breathing. You're worth it.
That's lovely. And where can people find you?
Sure. Theworthyphysician.com.
Theworthyphysician.com, and you can find Dr. Shah-Haque's book, Thriving in Burnout, Through Burnout.
Thriving After Burnout.
Thriving After Burnout on Amazon.com. Thank you very much, Dr. Shah-Haque, for being here.
Thank you.
So thanks for listening to No More, No Less. I appreciate the time you spent with me today. So please subscribe and rate the show if you enjoyed it. It'll help me create more amazing content and get that next little bit of validation that I so deeply crave. If you did enjoy it, well, that sucks. But to make sure, I think you should listen to my next 10 episodes and then decide. I mean, come on. Rome was not built in a day. I'm just getting warmed up here, guys. So thanks again. See you next time.